Thank you for joining us today for the Meritorious series, Bitcoin, Crypto, and Blockchain. I am your host, Catherine Kostreva. I'm the co-founder of Meritorious, and I am super pleased to introduce our fireside chat participants in this session, Master the Crypto, Tokenized Issuance, and Trading of Securities. First up is our moderator, Chad Arroyo, Head of North America for Mastercard Labs as a Service, a leading-edge global innovation practice delivering a range of innovation programs which incorporate the best in design thinking and agile development processes. Previously, Chad was the Chief Marketing and Product Officer for Ideanomics, a leading AI and blockchain-powered fintech company. Post-service in the U.S. Navy, Chad worked for DISA and Deloitte and founded several platforms. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you, Catherine.
Our guest for this fireside chat is Dan Doney, co-founder and CEO of Securrency. Dan co-founded Securrency in 2015 and serves as Chief Executive Officer and lead architect of Securrency's comprehensive cutting-edge technology. He is a recognized expert in software development, artificial intelligence, process automation, cybersecurity, dynamic asset pricing, and enterprise architecture. Dan served as the Chief Innovation Officer of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency and holds degrees from the U.S. Naval Academy and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Please join me in welcoming Chad and Dan. Take it away, Chad.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Dan, pleasure to reconnect here on this wonderful day to talk about one of our most favored subjects of all time. So thanks, Dan.
Yeah, listen, Chad, it's really a pleasure to join you here, old friend.
Yeah. So I've got a list of questions. Hopefully there are no crazy curveballs that just seem out of this world, but really just want to get to know you better, really share a bit more of your story with the audience. So with that, I'm just going to lead off with our first question here, if that works. Oh, Dan, your audio cut for a moment.
There we go. Yeah. By the way, I like curveballs. So if you want to throw a couple in there, I'll point to the fence like Babe Ruth, and we'll take one of those. But anyway, go ahead.
Phenomenal. All right. So first up here, Dan, you started as a nuclear submarine officer in the U.S. Navy and have a unique background as it relates to distributed ledger technology, the decentralized space, the intelligence community, including working for the DIA as the intelligence community's first chief innovation officer. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks. I definitely took a circuitous route to get to this point in my career. Definitely a financial services outsider. I've got an undergraduate degree in economics and stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, but otherwise haven't been directly involved in the world of finance. We share the same background in terms of going to the Naval Academy. And the reason that's important in terms of where we are in the market is we were ingrained with the concepts of integrity and honor as important key principles. And we think that that's really paid dividends in terms of the blockchain world, where not everyone's acted on those basic principles. It's at the core of the way that Securrency approaches the marketplace. So when faced with some of the uncertainty in the blockchain market, is compliance a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We always erred on the side of again, integrity and honor, and that these things should be embraced and then automated instead of skirted. And so that's certainly affected our approach in the market. After leaving the military, I went to work in the startup world just briefly, and then post 9/11 was recruited to NSA and worked there for almost a decade in what's now known as IARPA. The focus there was advanced research, and specifically my focus area was in artificial intelligence, machine learning. One of the greatest times of my career to work with world leaders in the field. I learned so much from that time as we were pushing the forefront of human machine systems. And some of that work, even to this day, is still ahead of its time. Much of that work has been integrated into things like IBM's Watson. I worked with those founders, Siri, et cetera. So I certainly had a chance to work with some world-class minds. I went from there to the Department of Homeland Security and got a chance to hone in the Department of Security environment how you build large-scale systems where there are many independent entities who need to work together to achieve a cause. And of course, that's the way the financial system works, with many independent actors who have to work together to create a secure financial environment. So the tools and techniques that I learned in terms of enterprise architecture and in the importance of identity were set there. I was part of a team that won the Excellence in Government Award in 2012 for citizen-facing government. And there we focused on how citizens can check their government-held privacy data to verify accuracy. And that mechanism is really at the core of protecting privacy and scalable identity. That's really important because that's where the blockchain space is today. So I had a head start on this for at least 10 years. And all of these, that earlier work in my career led me to the Defense Intelligence Agency. And that's really where I was first exposed to blockchain. So a long route, lots of interesting challenges along the way. And all that led to the kind of background that prepared me to found this company in 2015.
Cool, Dan. That is, I mean, remarkable. Just the milestone achievements over the course of that journey, transitioning from kind of government service and the military over into the commercial practice. Just a ton of richness in that story, and certainly having experienced a number of those kind of question marks or risk factors firsthand on what's happened and the evolution of the blockchain space. Things like know your customer, know your business. I mean, digital identity all plays into these factors. Just such a critical element to this place. And as you focus now on RegTech, I mean, this is the next evolution. This is where a lot of the big opportunities lie. So with that, my next kind of question here is, with Securrency being a RegTech fintech platform that democratizes access to capital markets, Securrency's platform uses distributed ledgers and patented compliance model for single-click token issuance, trade, and transfer. Can you share with us Securrency's story and how does this work? Like, where's the magic sauce here?
Yeah, it's great. So we came, as I mentioned, we founded the company in 2015. I had been doing work in tokenization sort of as a night job while I was at the Defense Intelligence Agency. I was just fascinated by blockchain technology and showed that you could really tokenize. I was particularly interested in, and still am, in income producing assets. So I built a platform for tokenization in 2015. Now, it turns out creating tokens that are linked to real world assets is easy. It took me about 2 months worth of development to create a platform to do that. The hard part is, given the global scale of blockchain networks, matching the compliance rules associated with hundreds of different jurisdictions throughout the world, so that you allow the efficient movement of value in a globally connected network. And it turns out, guess what? Banks struggle with this problem. So as I founded the company for tokenization, we quickly realized that it was actually compliance automation that was the real challenge. Now, I thought as quickly as I built a tokenization platform, I'd be able to automate compliance. Why not? In just a few months. Well, I was off by almost an order of magnitude. And it took a lot more work to automate those components. And so we, along the way, have a number of patents, both awarded and in pending status, to automate these core financial functions. Now, the reason why this is important, first, recent rulings, and it's not just the events over the past couple of days in Congress, where folks are emphasizing the need for reporting and tax components and other compliance, but also you see internationally the same sets of rules in a number of different jurisdictions. Compliance can't be ignored in any space, and there's reasons why that's true. Protection of citizens is always a role of government that they must take seriously. So either blockchain is raging against the machine, or it's facilitating the machine. And there we found that you could actually enhance compliance and automate it through the use of smart contracts. That allows for efficient transactions globally. And that's the real secret sauce. It makes DeFi turns it into a thing which governments have a hard time accepting and where investors potentially face unnecessary risks, to something that's institutional grade. At the core of things like DeFi, you have enormous operating efficiency, the kinds of things that will revolutionize finance, but can't stand alone. They need these tools. And so it turns out the market has completely come to where we are. And that's a focus on, again, automating compliance, the biggest cost driver in every financial transaction. And then there are other factors as well. How do you interact or interoperate with legacy financial systems? How do you scale liquidity functions and custody functions? How do you ensure recoverability in the event of, for example, a distributed ledger getting wiped out by a quantum attack? These are all important core issues that we've tackled and solved. And now it turns out, again, we believe the market's ripe.
Amazing. Dan, you mentioned a key term there that's going to come up later in our discussion, DeFi. If we could just double click on that for the audience, because I'm not sure everyone has a robust understanding of what that means and its implications to the kind of larger market space. In your own words, like what is DeFi? What does it matter? How does it differ from maybe current ways of doing business? Yeah, great. So there's a broad definition of DeFi, and I'll start there just as a comparison, which is really any kind of financial activity that occurs on a distributed ledger. And of course, that's what all tokens are. That's what Bitcoin is. That's what cryptocurrency is. That's what security tokens are. That's interesting, but very broad. And it's also not new. What's new over the past couple years is taking financial functions, things like lending, collateral, market making, and encoding those in smart contracts in such a way that they can be combined together to create advanced financial products. That definition of DeFi we think is particularly interesting. The reason why we think it's interesting is we've seen and worked with strategic partners and understand the way their back office works. Their back office is built of a whole bunch of systems, some internal to that bank, some on other banks, that all need to be reconciled in order to perform basic financial functions. And things like collateral, where there are different systems that perform tri-party collateral and collateral used for this fund that all need to collaborate. There's no common, transparent, open model by which this collaboration can occur. And that results in enormous costs and slow speed associated with the way that existing banks work. That can be automated. And through the use of DeFi, as long as you can add in the compliance and accountability components, you can effectively eliminate back office costs for banks and make these advanced financial functions available globally. And that's particularly exciting because many people don't actually have access to these kinds of basic financial functions, especially in the developing world. Cool. Dan, thank you for cracking that open. I think the audience probably has a world of questions that just kind of comes from that, but we're going to press on a little further on the Securrency story here. So you created an infrastructure that enables freedom, yet respects rules and regulations, particularly when talking about money flows and investor protection and things that you have to guard against, like cyber terrorism, anti-money laundering, and so forth. Can you talk about Securrency's focus on creating global infrastructure that facilitates compliance with local regulation, as well as challenges you're experiencing and currently addressing in market? Yeah, look, so there's a core philosophical position here that's worth articulating. There's different views regarding the importance of regulation, the importance of government oversight, the invasiveness of the censorship that can come associated with any body as they interact in the space. And we think there's a very careful balance that needs to be struck. We're coming at this from a libertarian perspective. So it is not a nihilist perspective. So in a nihilist view, no government is good. Any oversight, any form of centralization is a bad thing. That's not a healthy view from our perspective, because in fact, anytime there's more than one person, there's going to be a collaboration between people as to what the rules are. Governments are simply a reflection of that. And it turns out governments have a responsibility to protect their citizens.
And so therefore, they have a responsibility to create rules. And those come in the form of regulations. It's not that every regulation is good or every taxation system is well formed, but we recognize that there is a need for these things. And so therefore, there's a mechanism by which societies can enforce those things in financial transactions and other kinds of transactions. So the view that there can't be any regulation or any oversight is, we think, simply one that doesn't scale. So since that's true, how do you make it so that regulation is transparent, not a barrier to innovation? And that comes through and competitive. So where parties have a choice of going from one jurisdiction to another. That comes through a process of automating these regulations. Because you can build a smart contract that encodes regulations, it turns out it's not an easy thing to do, but we've managed to do it. So we can take, for example, the rules for the SEC or the rules in Australia for ASIC or the rules in the UK or the UAE and encode those in machine readable form and then apply those to transactions for assets in the space. It makes it so that I can automate transaction compliance. That is to everyone's advantage. There's a high barrier to entry for startups to learn all of those rules in every jurisdiction globally. They'd like to be able to simply use recipes and apply them in this financial space. Regulators would like to be able to know, without having to inspect every smart contract, that the rules are being properly enforced associated with their regulations. And so by taking this approach, we think we've struck a balance.
Amazing, Dan. I can't highlight enough for the group just how important this is. Like, even in my current capacity within the Mastercard innovation team, currently talking with banks on a regular basis, and they are encouragingly more and more trying to dive in and develop their point of view and roadmaps as it relates to blockchain and crypto. And regulation just continues to come up as a key point of concern that can even just inhibit moving forward on things that they would even want to be doing from an innovation standpoint. So Dan, the work that you're doing here is just absolutely critical to just cross that chasm as larger FIs kind of step into the space. All right. Cool. Next question here. There's a panel later today on NFTs and DeFi. DeFi, or decentralized finance today, generally a fully decentralized and unregulated activity, often focuses solely on crypto assets. Securrency focuses on what it terms institutional DeFi. Can you talk more about what that means for asset management, investments, and trading?
Yeah, so let's take, for example, a loan. It's just a basic model for what a loan works. So I can go to the bank, I can get a mortgage. That mortgage will have a set of variables associated with it. When was it originated? What's the interest rate? How's interest rate calculated? Is it variable or fixed? When do I pay off the principal? What are the fees associated with late payments, et cetera? There's a small number of total variables associated with that loan, which can actually be variables in a smart contract. And where the execution, like for example, every time a payment is made, what do you do now that the payment is made? How does that affect principal and interest? Those can be encoded in a smart contract. It's very straightforward to do this. That creates a self-processing asset. So in other words, regardless of who the owner is or where it sits in the world, the asset contains its own business logic in such a way that it's transparent. So if I receive one of these loans, I know there's a simple wallet address where I make my payment every month. It doesn't matter if this is bundled into, a RMBS, with 100,000 other loans in an RMBS portfolio, or it's owned peer-to-peer by another party. It processes that payment and pays its owner in that regard. Well, this is exciting because the legacy way of doing this is encoded in one system is the rules associated with the processing of that loan, perhaps by the originator, perhaps by some other party. That loan becomes very difficult to sell to another party, which has a lot to do with the liquidity and the ability to issue more loans. It can take a month or more for that transaction to clear. It's enormously expensive. In the DeFi world, that same loan can move about freely, transacting 100 times per second if needed. But here's what's maybe even more exciting. The lack of transparency associated with the processing of the loan in 2008 of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of these loans very nearly caused global financial collapse. The fact that that data was captured in hundreds of different systems made it difficult for investors, banks, et cetera, to see the systemic risk that was actually in their portfolio. In this world, it's completely transparent, where all of those transactions, every time a person repays their loan, can be seen and held, kept private, but can be observed regarding the performance. That's a radically different financial landscape. Now, loan is one. There's all kinds of other financial instruments, derivatives of various sorts. Again, collateral structures associated with these, FX forwards, contracts, convertible notes, et cetera. These are all financial instruments that represent processes that can be easily encoded. And then automate the big functions associated with understanding banking, balance sheet risk, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very exciting world that the big banks now recognize is the future of finance. And this is why you see so many diving in. But it always comes back to the basic concepts of, can you do compliance or not?
Cool. Absolutely, Dan. And this notion of reporting and transparency, I think a lot of folks get wrapped around that all blockchains are publicly visible and all the transactions are accessible. But, there are ways, as you're describing, to provide a certain level of transparency and reporting, but not open up the full kitty for public audience. And I think that's interesting in the ways that can be brought forward in a methodical and very clear and applicable way.
That's right, Chad. So just to summarize those ways, one is the use of zero-knowledge proofs on public networks. Another is, of course, private networks, though you lose some of the benefits of public networks. So there's great ways to protect privacy and allow transaction accessibility. And that's, we think, the future.
Excellent. Okay, so one of my last questions here on the list. So Securrency, to your credit and your team's efforts, you just closed a monster funding round. So $30 million at $110 million valuation, backed by State Street, US Bank, Wisdom Tree, and Abu Dhabi Catalyst Partners. This really suggests that institutional players are looking at security tokenization more closely. Can you talk more about this and what's in store for Securrency?
Yeah, so these are fantastic partners for us. And what we can say with absolute certainty is these partners, State Street, for example, just stood up a dedicated division for block. Remember, they only have two in their 200-year plus history. This is number 3 division dedicated to digital instruments. Institutions are fully committed to this path. They recognize that it disrupts their own existing models, but they also recognize that they either join in or are disrupted out of the future. So these are highly committed partners who are looking to retool. They must have compliance. It is essential. But as they do that, they can open up their services much more broadly in a more cost-effective way to partners broadly. So we're excited. This round is a reflection of that commitment from key parties. Wisdom Tree, of course, is a leader in asset management, and they are hell-bent on updating the already cutting-edge model of ETFs into this new blockchain-enabled world. And US Bank similarly is committed to full digital transformation. So we think it's exciting. It's a reflection in the market that the institutional players are quite serious about this. This is not a matter of if, but simply when this becomes the dominant method for finance.
Cool. Dan, phenomenal. I'm just kind of looking down in the chat here to see if we have any questions. I think we got time for one or two. So first one here, compliance instantiation hard-coded in TradeFi platforms. Like how is that taking place today, or is that even possible from your perspective? What's that?
Yeah, so in traditional finance models, it is oftentimes hard-coded into business logic that's spread amongst a range of different systems. So it's very hard to verify, if you're a regulator, that it's in fact encoded consistently across the various banks in the marketplace. In fact, it isn't. We talked to one bank and another bank. Their definition of, for example, qualified institutional buyer was different. And therefore, you ran into collisions in the market. This is just one simple example of how hard it is in traditional finance to come to consensus on even basic definitions. In in the blockchain world, that's not hard. In fact, the essence of blockchain is consensus. So having consensus among the rules and even the definition of what defines the rules is very simple. This is the reason why you can actually automate these things effectively.
Totally. Let's see. I'm going to try to transform one of the latest comments in the chat to a question. Do you see a world where institutions both adopt DeFi to some degree, as well as pursue maybe what we would refer to as their business as usual models, and still have a place in the future in the next 10 to 30 years? I know that's, beyond the normal lead times of projecting the future, but like when you start to look at that outlook, any thoughts come to mind?
Yeah, look, so there's no question. If you want to have a brand new world, you have to bridge from the old to the new. So you still see as big as DeFi transactions are, or blockchain transactions generally, they're a blip on the radar screen, even at $1 trillion of some of, for example, the biggest custody banks that are out there. So the best way is to retool those. We think the fastest way is to create the effective bridge where you can move back and forth between legacy and blockchain-enabled world. If you have an all or nothing decision of go to the new or old, then it's going to be a much longer path to get to the destination that we all want to get to. I simply don't agree with the proposition that institutions want to come and dominate this space. They recognize that this is a threat. And it will either come from and threat, not in a good way. It's a threat if they stay still. They've got to move. This isn't an us versus them proposition. It shouldn't be, at least from our perspective. If you open up these processes and make them highly competitive, whether it's a challenger or an incumbent who takes advantage of this, the bottom line to all interested parties is costs go down, access goes up. That's what everyone wants. And so DeFi, despite the term, is not meant in defiance of institutions. The balance sheets do matter. Trust does matter in the end. And so it's really a blending together of these two worlds. And I think we really should move past the us versus them model if we want to get to the end state.
Absolutely. Dan, really appreciate that. I think coexistence is definitely the name of the game. I see we're coming up on time here. So I think with Catherine coming on, that might be a wrap for us, unless you've got more, Catherine.
Excellent. All right. Chad, thank you for everything. Dan, of course, outstanding, compelling achievements. I wish you and your team continued success at Securrency. To our guest, thank you for joining us. In just probably 15 seconds, I'm going to pour you right back into our next session, the future of blockchain and how companies should use it. See you soon. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.